What's up, potheads and political junkies? You're watching Cannabis Culture News Live. It's Friday, October 5th. I'm Jeremiah Vandermeer, editor of Cannabis Culture. And yeah, we're here in our Pot TV studio on the second floor of our awesome CCHQ at 307 West Hastings. If you're in Vancouver, you got to come down and check us out. Come and sit in the lounge right behind me here, which is just opening at 4 o'clock on the second floor. Of course, our top floor lounge is open at noon and closes at midnight through most of the days of the week, a little later on weekends. Our sound okay out there, chatters? What's that? Oh, it opens at 10. Opens at 10. Sorry, not noon, 10. And this one opens at 4. So, on the show today, Cannabis Roots, the Hidden History of Marijuana, a big conference coming to Vancouver on November 3rd, put together by Mr. Chris Bennett, cannabis historian. And I'll have Chris on the show. He's in the background right now. And also on the show, Mark Klokeid, the weed guy, will be on the show. He just got back from China, where he was shooting some footage for the film that's going to be made by Chris Bennett about the roots of cannabis and the spiritual and religious use of cannabis through the years. The footage he shot was of a mummy that's thousands of years old that was buried with a big bowl of weed. So we're going to find out about the mummy and talk to Mark about that. And we actually have a little bit of footage to play of the mummy, I do believe. So hopefully that works out. But before we do that, I wanted to just quickly talk about the presidential election in the United States that was this, sorry, not the election, but the debate for the election that was this week. Obama and Romney battling it out. Everybody said Romney won when I was reading the stories. But of course, absent from either of their talking points or any of Jim Lear's questioning was anything to do with medical marijuana or marijuana at all in the United States, when there's several ballot initiatives, 3 of them, to legalize marijuana in the country. So they didn't talk about that at all. But I just wanted to play a little clip from CNN that did mention the marijuana issue in relation to the debate. Marius, maybe you can cue that one up for us. Oh, okay, I think I can cue it up, actually. This is CNN's coverage of the debate and a little nod they gave to the marijuana issue. Check this out.
Pot on the ballot. Voters in Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, 3 states, are going to decide whether or not to allow marijuana to be sold and taxed. And in Massachusetts, they're going to vote on whether to legalize medical marijuana. Now, in Colorado, the push for legalization could actually affect the entire presidential election. Out front of this story, John Avlon tonight in Denver.
It could go either way.
Here in Colorado, the fight for the White House is only one contentious issue on the ballot. If Congressman Jared Polis has his way, his state will be the first in the nation to legalize marijuana possession for adults. Sell it like a bottle of wine. The idea is simple. Tax and regulate marijuana in much the same way liquor is today. Jobs for our people, money for schools. Who could ask for more? That's right. Money for schools. The amendment would use the first $40 million in tax revenues to build new schools. But does this mile-high idea add up? Denver School Superintendent Tom Boasberg says no.
But this kind of discussion appended onto this kind of a measure strikes me as much more of a gimmick. It strikes me as a real cruel joke almost on our kids that this is the framework that people are proposing to have the discussion about what our kids need.
It'll have a good impact on schools. I don't know why it would be a cruel joke or a gimmick. Is $40 million enough? No, of course not, but it makes a strong dent in it.
Opinion is divided in this purple swing state. But a Denver Post poll showed that 51% of Coloradans support the amendment, with 40% opposed. The only age group dead set against legalization are those over 65. And among voters aged 35 and younger, the margin of support is 2 to 1. That's a coveted voting bloc for both campaigns, which have dismissed the idea of legalizing marijuana.
Should marijuana be legalized for medical use?
Aren't there issues of significance that you'd like to talk about?
This is a significant issue in Colorado.
The economy.
We're not going to be legalizing weed or what anytime soon.
One question is whether this amendment will drive some of those young voters to support Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson, the former Republican governor of New Mexico, who is a strong advocate of marijuana legalization.
Look, it's a domestic issue. It's a debate in Colorado. Mitt and Barack, from what you just showed there, should know a lot of people care. It's a key issue. But I know this isn't the first high-profile attempt to legalize marijuana. So what's the track record, John?
That's right. What hasn't been good for advocates of marijuana legalization, most recently in California, just 2 years ago in the Tea Party election of 2010, polls initially said that this measure might pass. California looked like it was on the verge of legalizing marijuana, went down to defeat on election day. So it's a significant cautionary tale for folks who looks at a polls this far out, especially in a state this deeply divided. But what's fascinating, Aaron, is the way this argument's being pitched right now. They're saying strict regulation, fund education. They're really trying to put schools front forward on this issue. It's a different tack than we've seen in the past on this effort to legalize marijuana.
Well, I can't wait till it comes up during the debate, because I just bet that it will, as it should. Thanks very much to John Avlon.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So that was another clip from Mox News. And if you guys haven't checked out Mox News, you should go over to Mox News and make a donation to that guy. He's so great. He downloads all those clips off. I guess he's got a PVR going, and he just uploads endless amount of clips that are actually relevant. The ones that CNN doesn't really publish on the internet and some of these other places. Sorry. That I'm going to take this bong rip real quick here. Was that clip from CNN? That was a CNN clip, right? I think so. So I'm hitting Duchess here. Yesterday, while we were chilling out in the office, a friend stopped by and had a rip out of Duchess, and that was Be Real from Cypress Hill. Marius, can you show him the picture here on this one? Be Real, I'm sure that everybody knows who Cypress Hill is. Needs a little explanation. One of the biggest rap groups in the world. Pioneered weed rapping. There was nobody talking about weed back in 1991 before their first album came out. They were really the first ones to talk about weed positively in their raps. There's a couple shots of him hitting Duchess right there. I don't know how well you can see that. Is there a bit of a reflection on there? Hitting Duchess. You can find these photos actually on my Facebook account right now. They will be on Cannabis Culture this weekend in a blog post. But it was very cool hanging out with Be Real. He was an enlightened individual about lots of different issues. We had great conversation, and I don't want to say too much, but I'm sure we'll be working together in the future on some projects. So, Jody, I thought maybe I'd bring you up first. Jody Emery's in the house, and I wanted to have Jody on to talk about a couple things. Jody had a recent newspaper appearance in the Georgia Straight, being quoted.
Should I go grab that?
Is it around here
Yeah.
somewhere? Sure, yeah, grab it. We'll get your mic over here. And I also wanted to talk about Mark's latest blog and a mission that Jody and I are going on in November.
Fun. Yes. Well, this is the Georgia Straight. And where's the camera at? I can't really tell what's going on here. All right. Georgia Straight, newspaper, local free copy. Justin Trudeau running for the leadership of the Liberal Party voted in favor of mandatory minimums, and so Mark and I are just talking about how we're not that impressed, and yeah, you can check it out online at georgiastraight.com.
Carlo Pablito, the writer for the Georgia Straight, called Jody up, and Jody, what did he quote you as saying there?
Well, I was on the phone with him, and he asked me what I thought of Justin Trudeau, and I said, besides being a pretty boy, some other things. Well, he's a handsome face, and everybody talks about that. Nobody would say I said something false.
No.
He is a pretty boy.
Yeah, and what you were saying is that that's basically all he is.
And that he had voted for mandatory minimums for marijuana with Bill C-15, and I said, I don't find him appealing. So anyway, the Liberals are trying to find a leader, and they're desperate for support, and I think they should join the majority of Canadians who want marijuana to be legal, and also join their own party resolution that said they should legalize marijuana, and they should just push that issue, and they would get a lot of support. And Justin Trudeau doesn't stand for anything at all, so we could push him maybe in our direction. Yeah. So that's, something in your favor when you don't have any principles or anything to show for what you've...
Well, and the Liberals seem to have got that idea anyway with the passing of the resolution and them sort of focusing on the pot issue.
Stuff happening. I mean, next Friday I'm with the Vancouver East Liberal Party at an event where they're showing the Union movie and having the Normal Women's Alliance of Canada represented there somehow. And yeah, there's action being taken. So I'm always happy about that. But anyway, that's just latest blurb with Mark was quoted as calling him a fucking hypocrite. That's what he called him once because he smoked pot with Justin Trudeau before. So Mark was really upset that Justin Trudeau would vote in Parliament in favor of mandatory minimums for pot.
And I remember the clip of him actually voting, him standing up with a smile on his face and voting for it. We were really upset at the time that it happened, but
yeah, it wasn't any good.
Yeah.
But in other news, though, I did just edit and post Mark's latest prison blog up on cannabisculture.com, and he talks about the upcoming election and how excited we are about the legalization initiatives and measures and amendments being put forth in Washington, Colorado, and Oregon. So Mark writes about supporting those, and definitely check out his blog and what he has to say about all of that. And he also endorses Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray as president and vice president in the U.S. because while we both love Ron Paul, he's no longer in the running, and the Libertarian Party deserves your vote more than Obama and Romney do. But vote however you feel you need to. It's not a fun game to play, but you got to play it because you don't have many other games you can participate in with these big people. So
it's a tough one down there because I'd like to support a third-party candidate as well if I was an American citizen. But it's really tough when you have that two-party system and it's so close that if you vote, you know, maybe if you vote for it's like the whole spoiler idea with Ralph Nader.
If I had to vote for one of the two, I'd vote for Obama, I guess.
Yeah,
but
because if not, I mean, if you...
It's not voting for Romney, that's for sure.
Romney, oh my goodness. These people are brutal. That clip, I just played a clip, and it showed Romney trying to divert. Somebody asked him about medical marijuana, and he totally refused to talk about it. He says, let's talk about the economy, the economy, the economy. Something important.
But there are important votes coming up, and on November 6th, the Tuesday voting day for our American brothers and sisters across the border, we're going to be down there in Seattle covering live the results of Initiative 502, and we're also going to be bringing in affiliates from Colorado and Oregon to hopefully update us throughout the night via video for you to view live here on Livestream on Pot TV, the results of all three votes coming in. So check out cannabisculture.com and pot.tv for more info on all of that.
It's going to be a fun trip.
Yes, it will. We love going down to Seattle, and history may be made. I have a really good feeling about it. I'm just, you know, if I had to bet, I would bet on it passing.
It's doing very well in the polls in Washington State. The Oregon one isn't doing so well, and the Colorado one is like right on the line. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
One way or another, it's going to be fun.
And people might wonder why I'm so interested in Washington above all the others, and I'm going to admit I am. You know why? Because Washington State is our neighboring state. Washington and Seattle are where Mark was indicted. Washington is where Mark was extradited to. Washington is where Mark was sentenced in federal prison. And Washington is where legalization was proposed by Mark Emery's own prosecutor. And happy 420.
Happy 420.
Here in Vancouver.
I can hear the alarm going off somewhere.
And so that's why I care about Washington so much.
Right.
Because they're going to make history. Because everywhere Mark goes, the movement and the momentum maybe goes.
Follows him around.
Yeah. He sent the money and the seeds, and now he had to go down there to kind of oversee from within the prison walls the growing of the movement of freedom. Who knows? Seriously, when Mark, if he's only home in 2014, what's going to be on the ballot that year? Like, every state? Who knows? It depends on how hard everybody works. So anyway, that's the story.
Awesome, Jody. Well, thank you for coming on and bringing us up to date on the latest.
Uh-oh, it's all quieter all of a sudden. Did I mess up the mic? Is this better?
Uh-oh.
Testing.
Back. Someone bumped a mic or something and got way quieter all of a sudden. Oh, okay.
It might have been me.
Hopefully it's still working. Can you hear us out there? All right. Cool, Jody. Thanks a lot. Yay. Okay. It's going to be a fun trip.
Thanks, everyone. Yep.
And we'll keep you guys out there in Pod TV land posted on all the latest on that, of course, as we get ready to go down there. Yeah, there's still that picture of Be Real there, token on Duchess. I guess I should probably take another bong rip. Marius, you didn't have a bong rip. Why don't you come and have a bong rip? For 420. Yeah, the Washington thing, it definitely will have an effect here in British Columbia if Washington State does legalize, and if they start...
Brought my own bong.
Oh, nice. If Washington State becomes the new Amsterdam of North America, it would be pretty amazing. I know it's not at the state where they'd have cafes or coffee shops or anything like that yet, but if you do have state stores selling this, and I mean, it might be difficult for that to happen. But yeah, possessing it alone is a huge thing, and it's definitely going to bring a lot of tourism there. And Washington will have a new sort of image in the world. Pot smokers, kind of like how BC used to. We've sort of the cops here are still pretty cool. BC's working hard. Hopefully, we'll have our Sensible BC initiative in 2014 and pass that one as well, and then we'll have our ounce of weed decriminalized. Awesome. So Marius, I thought I'd play this Cypress Hill video, and then on the other side we'll have Chris up. This Cypress Hill video, Cypress Hill just worked on a new album, well, it's an EP anyway, with Rusko, the dubstep producer. And if you guys watch the show, you probably know that I like dubstep music a lot, so I was thrilled to see the two of them working together. And there's a new video and song out, Roll It, Light It, and this is Cypress Hill and Rusko together. It's pretty awesome. Is it ready to roll? Awesome. Check this out. What's up? All right, we're back here with Mr. Chris Bennett.
Hey, pleasure to be on the show again.
And Pot TV alumni, the manager of Pot TV at one point.
2000 to 2005.
That's right. Chris, I had you on last week when we did mushrooms. That was a lot of fun. You enlightened us and gave us some info about the history of mushroom use. And Marius and I both were floating high on the magic mushrooms. Thanks for coming on last week. That was fun.
Yeah, you guys were wide-eyed.
And I wanted you to come back this week because we didn't talk about the Cannabis Roots Conference.
That's right.
The Hidden History of Marijuana, which is your November 3rd conference coming up here.
That's right, right here in this space that we're in right now, November 3rd. Got a variety of academics coming out to speak about different aspects of cannabis history. And this is all part of a bigger project, a film Mark Klokeid and I are making under the same title, covering a lot of the same material.
So maybe tell people, before we get into who's actually coming to the conference, tell people a little bit about this hidden history of marijuana. What does that mean? What is that?
Well, you know, when most people think about the history of marijuana, their mind goes back to the 60s hippie era or maybe the jazz era of the 30s and reefer madness.
Right.
But they don't really realize that cannabis has been part of the human experience for tens of thousands of years. You know, it used to be thought that we had a relationship with cannabis going back to 12,000 years when the oldest evidence of hemp fiber had been found out of Taiwan. But more recent archaeological evidence of tools used for the decordation of hemp place it back about 30,000 BC. And even some of the top cannabinoid researchers in the world, like Dr. Jeffrey Guy from GW Pharmaceuticals, are speculating that cannabis and the endocannabinoid system in our body and brain may have played a role in what's known as the Great Leap Forward, when man suddenly started coming up with all this tool-making ideas and fire, control of fire and things like that. So this is a lot about that, and you know, for thousands of years in virtually numerous cultures, in ancient Assyria it was known as kanabu and burned in temples and used as a medicine, or China, where, you know, Emperor Shen Nung is said to have written the first pharmacopoeia around 2700 BC, where it was prescribed for a variety of maladies, as well as for talking to spirits and stuff as well, you know, or some of these scholars will be talking about potential Greek references, with a number of well-known Greek philosophers and cults and things like that. Then there's the whole Judeo-Christian tradition with these references to cannabisum, and new archaeological discoveries like a 4,000-year-old Soma temple in the Karakum desert of Afghanistan, where there's evidence that a drink was prepared from cannabis and ephedra. So all these wonderful things showing this, you know, incredible indigenous relationship humanity has with cannabis and how it spread throughout the ancient world is largely overlooked when we talk about cannabis or we consider cannabis, because really it's a natural right that most of our ancestors were using at some point, and it's a fabulous, fascinating history.
Now, part of your experience of you figuring this stuff out and then doing a hell of a lot of research into it, I mean, you've got 3 books about this topic that you published, but you had sort of a revelation, and it was related to cannabis use in the Bible. And
well, you know, it was about the tree of life, you know, cannabis being the tree of life from the book of Revelation. I had this experience like about 23 years ago, and then I kind of doubted it, so I thought, well, if there's anything to it, then somebody somewhere will have written something about, you know, something similar to this, and I started collecting data on cannabis in different religions and found out, sure enough, at the turn of the century and in the 20s and 30s, a number of scholars were talking about potential references to cannabis in the biblical texts themselves, in the ancient Hebrew and stuff. And I kind of rehashed some of that and started digging a bit deeper and finding a lot of corroborative evidence and then gaining more support for those ideas.
And so the people that are coming to the conference, you've got quite a lineup, and these are experts in the field. Carl Ruck is one of them.
Professor Carl Ruck, he coined the term entheogen, along with Jonathan Ott and some other scholars, and this is the commonly used term for the use of psychoactives in religious studies. He's also presented evidence on the role of cannabis in religion in a court case involving the Church of the Universe in Ontario. He was a witness and provided an affidavit for my court case as well regarding the same issue. Right. Yeah, he's an expert on ancient Greece and has, you know, taught at Boston University. He's going to be talking about cannabis in ancient Greece at this conference.
Yeah, and actually you can find a summary of his talk on the front page of Cannabis Culture under Cannabis Roots, The Hidden History of Marijuana. And actually, do you want to maybe talk just a little bit about his talk?
I didn't really read over it that thoroughly, you know. I've been just kind of busy getting ready with other things. And then we have another guy talking about Greece. Actually, you know, 3 of the main speakers will be touching on Greece in their speeches. David Hillman, who wrote The Chemical Muse, which is a history of drugs in Western culture. And he's a classic example of how academia has been kind of trying to poo-poo this type of research, because he wrote his PhD on this. They wanted him to take out all drug references out of his PhD in order to get his PhD, and he, you know, was
how could you take out the drug references?
And so he ended up publishing it as The Chemical Muse, and still got his PhD. Yeah, he'll be again talking about Greek priestesses using cannabis in these sex rites and stuff, which should be pretty fascinating to hear about. Then we have Dr. Michael Aldrich, who did the High Times Encyclopedia of Drugs Cannabis chapter, which is pretty thorough and in-depth. And he'll be talking about the connections between Dionysius and Shiva, and how this all relates to the discovery of that ancient Soma temple I was talking to you about in the Karakum Desert in Bactria Margiana region. And so that should be pretty fascinating. And then Ted Smith, who just recently had his book, Hempology 101, which deals with the history of cannabis and hemp, will be talking about the history of medical marijuana. And I think I'm going to present a slideshow and discussion about the actual archaeological evidence that we have for cannabis. So what we have in the way of solid, concrete archaeological evidence for the role of cannabis in the ancient world. And this will take a look at the ancient Zoroastrians and 4th century early Christian finds, all sorts of things, you know.
And did you mention the Horowitzes as well?
Oh, yeah, Michael and Cynthia Horowitz, who were the curators of the Fitzhugh Ludlow Memorial Library. I think they're either going to be presenting on cannabis and literature or women in the history of cannabis. I'm not sure which one. And if they're going to be presenting together or apart, I'm still waiting to get a fine-tuning a few details and stuff like that. But they're very, very knowledgeable people and edited a few books, did Shaman Woman, Mainline Lady, all about the history of women and drugs. So it's a pretty good lineup, and the whole thing will be filming, you know, probably streaming it live here on Pot TV, and then as well, you know, probably excerpts of it will appear in the film that we're making as well. You know, we're doing this so we can bring out a few of these people at once and knock off a few interviews for the movie as well.
Right, it's a really good idea to do it that way, for sure.
So yeah, buy your tickets at the Urban Shaman. You can email theurbanshaman@hotmail.com, and we'll give you information how to buy tickets via PayPal if you're out of town, or if you're in town, 307 West Hastings. Come on in the back. We've got tickets there. It's $70. good price for such an incredible lineup, 50 for students. And it's here on the second floor Vapor Lounge, so between speakers we can puff pretty freely and get in the whole spirit of cannabis.
Cool. Chris, I wanted to ask you, how does this rich history of cannabis get lost so easily?
Yeah, well, you know, there was a Dark Ages which caused a big rift in history, you know what I mean? And then, yeah, I think that a lot of people didn't really, you know, a lot of it's like based on archaeological finds and discoveries, you know what I mean? And then breaking down some of these ancient languages. We wouldn't know about these Assyrian references if it wasn't for the combination of archaeology and learning the Assyrian language and cuneiform texts and stuff like that. Same with the Egyptian references. And so there's, you know, big breaks in time here as well. And then, you know, some people, you know, like a lot of historians haven't really recognized how powerful a role these things can play in society. You know, my own view is that, you know, most of our modern religions are based on come out of the shamanic exploits of people using psychoactive substances, and then traditions start building around these and religions. But it originates with that, and that's a view shared by a number of scholars out there now. But it's for a long time, you know, like as David Hillman experienced when he was getting his PhD, there's almost like it's a taboo subject. I know Professor Ruck, when he was researching in ancient Greece, when they found out that his research of some of these ancient sites had to do with the role of psychoactives, all of a sudden museums and other officials didn't want to help him do that research anymore. And I know that also Professor Scott Littleton ran into that same issue. So it's almost kind of got an area of taboo in academia, but I think that that's starting to fade away, and there's more and more interest in these substances, which, you know, are still used today in shamanic rites in South America and Africa and places like that.
Right, and of course now, somebody mentioned in the chat, like the Dark Ages that we're living in now.
Yeah, well, there was the Dark Ages for 1,200 years there in Europe, and witches were burnt at the stake for using cannabis, henbane, and a variety of other psychoactive substances in their own shamanic-like rituals.
Right.
So,
and we have our modern witch hunt.
I would say that the modern drug war is really, you know, Christians versus the devil's weed is where it originates. And particularly with people like Stephen Harper, these right-wing evangelicals we have here in Canada, and their draconian Bill C-10 and what's coming down the pipe here in November in Canada.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It continues now. And, you know, even though we've had hemp being used for years through navies throughout the world and all of this other stuff that's actually happened in the pretty much modern times, that's all been hidden away as well, even now.
When I first became a hemp activist in like 1989, 90, I didn't even, you know, I smoked pot since I was 12 years old, and I didn't even know what the word hemp was anymore.
Yeah.
It was hemp, what's hemp, you know? And it's like, that's only a few short decades.
Yeah.
And how much that was lost down the memory hole, this whole major industrial crop that was, you know, providing our cloth and rope and food to some extent for some people, or at least animal feed, you know, totally disappears, and it's down the memory hole in a few short decades. Nobody even knows. So, you know, that's how quick things can be lost.
And that's in a world where we have access to information like that. You know, we have libraries in every city all over the world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in 1990, all books on marijuana were pretty much banned.
Yeah.
High Times, all those types of things were banned out of Canada. So we didn't have a lot.
Yeah, no, it's true. Crazy. So the conference is coming up on November 3rd.
November 3rd.
But before, I just ask you one more thing. For people who aren't religious or who don't really understand this concept of the sacrament, can you explain what cannabis is used for these religious things? Like, what is a sacrament exactly?
Well, you know, it's played a different role in different things. You know, a lot of these ancient religions almost thought like getting the effects of some of these plants was like a possession by some sort of spirit or entity or something like that. You know, I could use maybe the biblical example of Moses. You know, when you throw, this is like based on the idea that these Hebrew references to this term cannabis, which appears originally in Exodus 30:23, and was translated as calamus in later Bibles, and they say this was a mistranslation. This is a reference to cannabis. But when you throw cannabis in this scenario, we have a situation where Moses is pondering on a question about his tribe Israel. He goes into the tent of the meeting, and he covers himself in this, you know, olive oil base that's got about 6 pounds of cannabis in it, mixed in with myrrh and cinnamon. Places this on his skin, and then he also places some of this on the altar of incense, and he speaks to the Lord in the pillar of smoke over the incense altar. Moses becomes like a shaman who in South America, Africa, is taking some psychoactive plant and then interpreting the effects of the psychoactive substances in it as some sort of possession or appearance or something like that. And he speaks to the Lord in the pillar of smoke, and he ponders on the question, and an answer comes back to him as his brain, the forebrain is stimulated with the cannabinoid receptors there. And he says, oh, this is what we should do, and an idea comes. So, in these ancient religions, a lot of it's all about, developing of reflective consciousness. And this also has to do with what happened in the Great Leap Forward, according to Dr. Guy Jeffries and these other guys. It's the idea that it really facilitated the thinking process by stimulating that area of the brain, that's really loaded with cannabinoid receptors. And other times, like with Sufis and sadhus, it's more about obliterating the ego and getting away from all your social programming and self-identification and being able to just really be at one with everything. So it's almost more about, here's a Sufi saying from the 12th century, God has granted you the privilege of knowing the secret of these leaves. Thus, when you eat of it, your dense worries may disappear and your exalted minds may become polished. So it helps you kind of shed off the ups and downs. Or here's a quatrain from the Taoists from about 400 BC. First a yin, then a yang. No one knows what I do. Jade buds of holy hemp for the one that lives apart. And so it's like life has its ups and downs, but you kind of can walk that middle road of detachment through the use of cannabis. So it really depends on the culture. Andrew Weil, the Dr. Andrew Weil, the well-known physician,
right.
He once said, he once said, cannabis is an active placebo. And I think that's a really good description because, when it was a major medicine, and these people were taking potent extracts of cannabis, there's very few actual references to people really getting high off of it. That's because they felt better. Their medicine was working, you know what I mean? Or, and if you go down to Brooklyn and you talk to some hip-hop kid who's smoking blunts, you're going to get a kind of a different sort of high from that guy than, say, if you went and talked to some sadhu in India who's taking it in honor of Shiva before he does his yogic exercises. So really, a lot of it has to do with your intent and feelings about it before you use it. And a lot of these different traditions had different intent and purpose.
Right. That's very, very cool.
And amounts too. Another important thing is sometimes it was ingested in large amounts, like the ancient Zoroastrians. They were ingesting these powerful extracts in large amounts and it would knock them out for a couple of days. So that's a whole different experience.
And how did they ingest it exactly?
Sometimes mixed with wine. It'd be like almost like a hash oil mixed into wine or something like that.
Right.
And then they'd ingest it, and it was like powerful enough to knock them out for 48 hours or so. They'd be in like a death-like coma, then they come back, and they believed the experiences that they had while in that state were actual experiences of the soul leaving the body and things like that, So.
Wow, very cool. And so there's another very famous religious person who has a sort of cannabis-related past, and that's, of course, Jesus Christ. The name Christ itself meaning the christened one. Yeah. And he, of course, cannabosum theory is correct, and he was christened in cannabis oil.
And a lot of the so-called miracles in the New Testament, as well as the Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic texts, described are similar to medical conditions that people use cannabis for now. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. Anybody that Googles Jesus Cannabis out there, you'll come up with the Cannabis Culture article and probably the High Times and some news stories and Carl Ruck's piece on this.
Well, and there's been like CNN broadcasts about it and stuff.
So it's pretty fascinating stuff. And, at first it sounds outrageous, but look into it and see for yourself. There's a lot to this.
Maybe tell people about your 3 books.
I've got 3 books. Green Gold, The Tree of Life, Marijuana and Magic and Religion came out in 1995, and that was like an overview of cannabis and different traditions, trying to put together as many historical references as we could. this was before the internet really took off, so and then all books and stuff, a different era of research. Then Sex, Drugs, Violence in the Bible, which was a development of what we learned about these biblical references while researching green gold, and also all the crazy sex and stuff in the Bible. It's loaded with crazy stuff. Just to be clear to people out there, a lot of people sometimes think I'm a Christian because I've written about these biblical traditions, but my view is the Bible is humanity's greatest stumbling block, and that this information about the role of cannabis in the Bible is as much a threat to fundamental religion as Darwin's theory of evolution was to the myths of Genesis, because what it reveals is the plant-based shamanic origins of the biblical tradition, and this is something that followers of that tradition have tried to squash wherever they've run into it, whether it be medieval witches or South American natives using mushrooms and peyote or whatever. It's like the ultimate fear of what they would call witchcraft and shamanism. Is almost considered devil worship by these traditions.
Right. Yeah, crazy. Well, and still the hunt for the witches goes on with our current modern day laws. And wow, this is interesting though. I think when this information gets out there, as you said, it is a big threat because it just shows how much of cannabis is ingrained in our culture. That's one thing they always say about, when you're arguing prohibition with people, and they say, well, alcohol's been part of our culture, and that's why alcohol should be legal and pot shouldn't. But I mean, of course, there's a massive history there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the whole endocannabinoid system indicates that we have some sort of indigenous relationship with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we co-evolved, I guess David Malma-Levine says.
Yeah. Well, there's some evidence for that. Cool. But for sure, it's been a big part of history, and it's a fascinating history, and these are great academics who are at the top of their field. Come on out and check it out.
November 3rd.
November 3rd.
November 3rd. And we'll also have it on Pod TV if you can't make it down. So we'll be broadcasting that live. And then just a few days later, we'll be hitting Washington State for the vote down there.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a busy week, that one.
Cool.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Usual.
Cheers. Take care, brother.
Yeah, always informative. Chris Bennett. And Chris, where can people get your books? I guess Amazon is the best place.
ForbiddenFruitPublishing.com. ForbiddenFruitPublishing.com. There's a bunch of articles there. And if you want to see some lectures or interviews or things like that, if you search my name, Chris Bennett, and marijuana on YouTube, there's some different lectures I've given at universities and things like that.
Awesome, excellent. And actually, in the show notes right now, I do have links to your 3 books, so people can find them there as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Chris. All right, so next up, Mark Klokeid's also in the house, the weed guy. Yes, you are. Oh, I know he's lounging on the couch over here. He doesn't want to get up. Yeah. I do have another video to play, but I think we'll save that one for the end of the show. We have actually 2 more videos because we're going to play a video about your trip to China.
I was just relaxing on the couch there at Vapor Lounge. Bright lights. Can I put the sunglasses on?
Sure. The weed guy wouldn't be the weed guy without his glasses on.
How's it going? Did you guys enjoy Chris? He was awesome, eh?
Yeah.
So informative.
A lot of great information. I can't wait till this conference.
It's a lollipop for after.
Oh. Now you'll be at the conference as well, showing your footage from China. We're going to look at a little bit of that today. You always bring so many goodies when you come on the show. That's a lollipop infused. What about the popcorn?
Cotton candy, popcorn, and raspberry.
I love this stuff. Here, give me some of that stuff. It's so good. And I usually eat half the bag and then I'm just comatose afterwards because it hits me really hard.
That one's cotton candy. Perfect for live television.
Eating, yeah, right on TV. Chewing in the microphone. So, there's a couple things I want to talk to you about. You always have a billion things to talk about when you're on the show. I think we'll start with the mummy stuff just because that's the theme of the show today.
Certainly.
So, you just got back from China. How long were you there for?
I was in and around China for 6 weeks.
And you were hanging out for a little bit, but you were on vacation as well, right?
Yeah, well, I took my daughter out there, so it's summertime, so I get my daughters, no school. So yeah, we went out there, and the idea was to be able to go to the northwest of China and go see the shaman. So in Turpan, which is west of Urumqi, which is where they had the riots in 2009. And it's Uyghurs are predominantly what live there. It's about 30% Chinese, but it's mostly Muslim and Arabic-speaking people. So it was quite the trip. It was really interesting just to be able to go in there and be immersed in such a culture.
And so you actually were able to go in and get footage of this.
Chris
mummy.
put me on this mission. He's like, there's this shaman. He's over here, and National Geographic had actually covered it. So, and it was like in the middle of nowhere. We had to like get a car to go from Urichi to Turpan with me and a cameraman. So, and a double translator to be able to translate, because everyone there spoke Arabic and not actually Mandarin.
Oh.
So, or Chinese, right?
Both,
so, yeah, you needed a translator for English too.
Yeah.
So we met 2 people that spoke English the entire time we were there. So yeah,
crazy, man. So, and you were actually able to get inside and get some really good shots of this thing. How old is this mummy?
The mummy's about 2,800 years old, and yeah, and it was found in the basin of Turpan in the Flaming Mountains. And there's actually they estimate about 10,000 tombs in the area. And there's lots of ancient cities, and was a main place where a lot of cities were situated along the Silk Road. There's 2 or 3 different ancient sites there in around that area of different cities from different eras, from like 1,700 years to like 2,500 years. So I have footage of that also, and we actually got the curator of the museum that worked there, because you're not allowed to film inside. I think one of the main things that they're trying to protect is the actual robbing of the tombs. I realized after, I thought maybe it was they're trying to control what was actually being said about it. Once I got there, it was it was really bang on exactly what we had thought about it in terms of like the shaman being Caucasian and the marijuana use, and that he used it for being able to speak with God and stuff like that. It was really out in the open. So, but literally the curator told me it's because people come and been robbing tombs for millennia.
Yeah, looking for old stashes. That's what now we know why they were robbing the tombs. Really, they were looking for some good weed.
So the whole area is just rich in ancient culture, and because it's like a desert atmosphere, everything's preserved so well. And the mummy itself was just buried in an epic place. And one of the things that I also wanted to show in the documentary was where the shaman is actually entombed, and it's off limits. You're not allowed to go there. And the curator of the museum, we were able to get her out of the museum and kind of have her as like a person to take us to these different sites. And cool. And she didn't want to like go track it down or nothing. Our cab driver we were able to convince, who only spoke Arabic, but basically are gung-ho. We actually found the area. The reason was because they're still excavating there. It was all fenced in, but it's all marked and with all big signs about it and what it is, right? So, but yeah, we actually tracked it down. I'm glad we did, because it really gave a backdrop of the Flaming Mountains and actually where this ancient shaman was entombed. So it really added to not just to be able to see him in the museum, it was also to where he was actually entombed. So I'd definitely like to be entombed there. It was just epic scenery.
And he was actually buried with some weed. But they wouldn't actually let you look at the weed itself, right?
No, well, that's illegal, so definitely not, right? But I mean, it was verified by Oxford University, and that had been documented before, right? I just wanted to get to know the shaman a little more. And I mean, he was Caucasian, I think, which is one of the crazy things, and he's in the Northwest. Is predominantly Islamic and Arabic back then also, but it was before religion. People got to realize it's before Islam and Christianity and Buddhism. Shamanism was the earliest religion. So, and I fully understood that once I got there and realized that's how it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool, man. So did you have any problems getting in there? I mean, was it, you mentioned before.
Oh yeah, no cameras, nothing. Like when we first got there, we were followed by the police. We got footage of the cops following us. We seen one couple that were white the entire time we were there.
Really?
So it's like, I mean, they had the riots there in 2009, and I think anyone going to the west of China goes to like Tibet or by the mountains, right? Go to Everest, right?
It's not a big tourist attraction.
Yeah, so and we literally like went out of our way to go to this like kind of like, the big draw to that museum is the oldest biggest land mammal, the rhinoceros. It's like rhinoceros or something like that. It's huge, right? So they have a big intact dinosaur of that.
Cool.
So, but
They're digging up a lot of stuff around there.
Yeah, but to stay on topic, they had big signs, no cameras, you're not allowed to film. And I'm glad we got the curator, because by like the 3rd day we arranged that we were going to be left alone in the museum, so I could actually shoot the video that we're going to be showing.
Nice.
So they just basically left that section alone for us so that we could film freely. But we show in the documentary that clearly you're not allowed to film. Like, they're really on it. So even the curator actually didn't want to be on the video a lot, you know, like
Right.
it's because basically if you're not like certified to talk about it, basically, you know, and that's the way they want it, right?
That makes sense. Cool. Well, maybe we should take a look at the video you brought with you here. And Marius, maybe you can do up the video for us there. Marius, are you ready to roll on that? Awesome. Okay, check this video out, and then we'll talk about it a little more on the other side.
All right, here's the shaman of Yanghai, and I want to thank him for teaching me so much. I've learned that shamanism is one of the oldest religions in the world, actually the oldest. They believe in nature and that sort of holistic belief. And I think it's quite clear that having marijuana buried beside him of the significance that marijuana had for so many years. And it's a wonder why it's illegal when there's been 0 deaths and it's been in our culture and in our heritage for so many years. I think it's time that people realize that this is our best evidence of medical use and also our right. Marijuana is medicine and it's been used for thousands of years. And Yanghai has just proven it.
Oh, it went black again. All right, we're good? Oh, okay, mine shows black now. It's all backwards. All right, well, anyways, I just wanted to say thanks to Chris Bennett, Jody Emery, Mark Klokeid, all for coming on the show today.
Here, man.
It is, it is. Although it still looks a little dark there on the screen because we have the windows behind us.
There's 2 big lights right there.
There is, that's true. And I wonder if it looks just a little dark on my screen, but maybe everybody out. That's right. It's our new set here. You can see the lounge activities going on in the background. People hanging out, using the vaporizers, medicating, getting high. Nice joint. And actually, I'm going to take this bong rip before we go. Might as well. Plug, I medicate.
All right, we got some cotton candy popcorn. Oh no, that's what we wanted to plug here is the chocolate lollipops. And of course the cherry flavored ones.
These things look
These
really
are
good.
big.
Yeah, let me show this to the camera here. What was that?
My new favorite one's the strawberry cheese for weed.
Strawberry cheese.
Yeah, that's what we've been predominantly smoking. Some Diamond Kush. All at iMedicate.
What's the location? What's the address?
6128 Fraser Street.
When you're in the city of Vancouver.
You betcha.
Yeah, it's a little dark up there. Yeah.
Smells
All right,
so
guys. Well, thanks for tuning in for another Friday, and we'll be back again next week. Now, there's no Mick show on Monday. He's not doing a show on Monday. He'll be going to Toronto this week, actually. So he's going to be stopping by here in the city on Wednesday on his way. So he may be in From Under the Influence on Wednesday. We'll have to figure that out. There may be a Monday show, though, because Rebecca from the Vancouver Seed Bank may have a show on Monday. So stay tuned to pot.tv for all the latest. Anyways, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks to Marius for working things out.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for Be Real for hanging out yesterday with us. That was really cool. And look for more collabos with him in the future. All right.
Later.
Yeah, peace, guys.